Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This time I'm going to be breaking down Slate, which is the second track of my EP Tines. Slate originally actually was two separate projects. It was this one here and then this other track called Wire, and Wire was going to be the third track in the EP, but then I decided to combine the two together. So I'll go over both parts of the project and I'll start off with the intro. So the very first thing you hear is just this piano, which is a lab soft piano, and it has a lot of effects on it. So I'll play it first without the effects and then I'll go through them one by one. Without it, it sounds like this. Now the very first effect I have in the chain is this vocoder, where I'm using the built-in pitch tracking to kind of layer it with a square synth. The only issue is with this project is the pitch tracking is very temperamental, and so if I start playback from kind of halfway through a lot of notes, it might sound a bit off, so I'll try not to do that. But what I'm doing here is I'm automating the dry wet throughout the intro. It's more noticeable later on during the chord sections, but it does come in a little bit here, and I've just automated it for effect. So with the vocoder it sounds like this. And just comes on there in certain moments. Next up is this kind of long effects chain. The main thing that's happening here is I have this grain delay with the pitch set to an octave down and the frequency set very low, and that creates this beating effect, which I've talked about before, and I'm automating that one here with the dry wet. You can kind of hear the effect there and probably hear it as well. Yeah, if I just turn the dry wet all the way up the whole time. That's the sort of effect it gives. After that I have just an overdrive emphasizing the highs, some multiband dynamics, so dynamic EQ in the mid-range because it's a very mid-range heavy piano, some erosion where this is kind of only on in the intro. You can't hear it much, but it's just adding some extra noise. A bit of reverb here, more present in the intro, and then it's all being filtered at about 1K up until this section. The next thing I have here is this MIDI line, which I froze and sent to my analog synth, my Minilog, which to be honest I don't use as much as I should, but then I recorded that, and that's this channel here, so that sounds like this. And that just has a bit of vocal doubling on, some reverb and some filtering in parts as well. This is what it sounds like with all these effects off. Then, barely audible, I have these sounds of me messing around with a deck of cards, and it's just a little percussive impact which I have going on very softly in the background, and that sounds like this. I'll turn it up. But that's set very, very quiet in the final thing. Then I have these little excerpts here from the freeze file of this cello patch, which is also labs, and I'll get to that in a second. But this just sounds like this. And they just have a reverb on 100% wet to kind of make a swell sound. So that's the first 16 bars. And then we get into the rest of the song here. The main patch is this cello sound, and I've frozen it because it also has a lot of effects on it, but I'll freeze it and I'll show you what it sounds like. So the main sound in this section is this Labs cello patch, and that sounds like this. This is it without effects. So the very first effect here is just this grain delay, and that sounds like this. I'm doing the same effect as with the piano, just this time it's an octave up, and I'm also automating the frequency here from 5 down to 1.5 times a second. Then I have a phaser, and a bit of resonators, which I've automated the dry wet for, so it's louder here. And this is set just to a D and then an octave and 2 octaves up. After that, some erosion, some more noise. It's very quiet. And then for these sections with the chord changes, I automate the frequency down so it's not as audible during the actual change. Then I have some reverb, which also only comes on during the kind of chord changes, where the strings have to completely stop, and so I kind of wanted to keep the space while the chord changes. And then here at the end as well. At this point I automate the delay time, or the decay time even, way up, and so it just carries on for a bit. Then I have some subtle compression. Only really taking a little bit off. Some EQ, kind of lowering the highs, and a high pass here, which is again for the chord changes. This multiband compression is only for the mid channel, not for the side channel, because I kind of wanted to keep the information in the sides intact and not compressed. And then the last thing is just the utility, which isn't doing anything. So I've frozen this channel, and then I've kind of taken some cuts from it here. And I also have some extra filtering just here at the end, where I've kind of looped it along a bit, and some frequency shifting as well here. You can kind of hear it coming there. And then there's this reverb, which just comes in the beginning. This one here is a pitch down a fifth, and it's just more in the background as we transition from this first project, or from the first track to the second, from the first half to the second. Then I have these two sounds, which I also recorded in with my Minilog synth. I just made a patch and recorded it out. Unfortunately, I don't have that on me, so I can't show you what the settings are like. But this first one sounds like this. And without the effects, it sounds like this. So the first thing is just a chorus here, then some vinyl distortion, which kind of adds in that lower grit. A bit of frequency shifting here, just for each note. You can hear it more there. Some erosion and some high passing. This one sounds like this. And without the effects, it sounds like this. That's it with the dynamic tube here. Some more saturation afterwards. Some glue compression. Compressing it pretty heavily just to kind of iron out these sort of peaks. Then the main thing in this section here is this bit reduction, which goes from 1, so off, to 7.48. And that creates that high end. Then I have some resonators just on the A note here. and this filter to kind of smoothen out this gap here. Last thing there's just some panning. This next sound is the sound of a glass clinking, and it sounds like this. And I have a very long reverb on here with 10-second decay time, as well as a bit of downsampling, redux. Then this sample here is one of my friends who sang a note into my microphone ages ago, and then I stretched it out, and in this case I'm just using it with a bit of a phaser and some panning as well, and that sounds like this. This one I've pitched up an octave and a fifth. Then the last thing in this section is some more ambience, so I just have this recording of me on a beach at La Palma. Quite quiet in the background, and then for this transition section here, between the two chords, I have this sound as well. And the original sounds like this. So I just took this sample and filtered it, low passed it, and then panned it here, going from left to right. So the first bass sound here is this pluck bass, and that sounds like this. Now what I'm doing here is I'm using the operator LFO, which I don't do that often, to control the filter here with a downward saw shape, just creating that motion. I could have also used an auto filter LFO, but this is what I was feeling. And this is just 4 different waves. So it's a sine wave being FM by 2 different sine waves and then a saw on top with varying coarse values. I have a high pass come in here, just so it doesn't really interfere with this bass, which is sort of the main one. I have this LFO here, or the auto filter even, which is low passing it towards the end of the note. And then I have a bit of reverb, which also comes in here near the end. I have a little bit of panning automation, so over the course of this note it just pans from center to hard left and then center to hard right, and so on. Then I have the main bass sound here, which is this operator patch. And so this is just a sine wave with a bit of erosion and some saturation. The auto pan here is coming in so that the movement of the bass matches this one sound here. And then it glides up to this sound, so you have the glide enabled, and so it goes up to this note. At this section I have the bass value in the saturator turn up, and that emphasizes the distortion more towards the high frequencies, and so you can kind of hear the high frequencies get crunchy at this point. And then it goes down to a low E. Then after that one I have this filter bass, and that sounds like this. This is 2 waves, both being FM'd, so this is one sine wave, but it's a 4-bit sine, so you can't see it in the oscillator harmonic section, but it's a 4-bit sine. And then this triangle wave, and they're both being FM'd by a sine wave at half the pitch, and this other sine wave as well on top. It has these effects, so I'll turn the effects off and I'll go through them. So first there's a chorus, then a pedal distortion, some more distortion, and just a little bit of EQ, taking away that harmonic and emphasizing the highs. So yeah, that's the first half. Overall it's a lot simpler than I usually go for my tracks, but then again it's only the first half. So the second half is what was originally called wire, and so just quickly I have a render here of the track, and I bring that in this section here. That's just that bass patch, but then it's warped to kind of be time stretched out a bit, and it's very quiet as well. So some elements from the second half of the track actually come in while Slate is still playing. And the first one here is this sound, which is a resampled time stretch version of the Discord notification sound, and that sounds like this. So I've just got some redux, erosion to kind of make it more noisy, and then I've pitched it up to semitones as well, so it's not really audible. You can't really make out that it's the Discord notification sound. It's also reversed with the reverb, and that comes in a couple of times here. The next sound that comes in is this pluck sound, and this is the MIDI. So this is just an operator patch, which is a square wave, but only the first 8 harmonics of the square wave here. And that's being FM'd by a sine wave, another sine, and another sine. I have the filter down, and there's also a filter envelope, which is this shape, and that's modulating the filter a little bit. And then I have some pitch envelope for each note, which you can kind of hear. And I have glide on as well, with a time of 24 milliseconds. After that, I have this vocoder, and it's modulating itself. And the reason I've done that is so I can kind of use the formant shifting here. See, I automate it for this section to be up an octave. And then I can also turn it on here, which isn't doing much, but for some reason I felt it necessary. After that, I have kilohertz phase distortion, just a bit of bit crushing, and some delay set to a dotted eighth note. So without all the other effects, the rest of it is just like making it easier to make a little bit of reverb here in the beginning, especially with the freeze on and some multiband compression. But without these effects, it sounds like this. Whereas with the effects, for this section, I turn on the freeze, and so you can kind of hear it. And then the reverb turns off, and the same here. At that point, the delay mix comes on, and here again. So I froze that and rendered it out, and the rest of the effects I have on it include this saturator, which is just saturating a little bit in parts here. So this comes on during the kind of the looped reverb bit. Just gets louder. Then I have a high pass, and towards the end of this, it gets quieter. A frequency shift as well, and I'm using the built-in LFO for the auto filter to make it into more of a rhythmic sound than a melodic one during the general rise section. The last sound I have in this break section here is this operator patch, which I also use throughout the whole thing. So this note here just sounds like this. This is actually the same patch from above, this filter bass, but then I have some slightly different processing on it. So instead of that EQ, I just have this rotator preset from grain delay, which I've automated on towards the end. A bit of reverb for the end as well, some compression, some pretty heavy compression, and this EQ, which just brings in the low frequencies. I also have I'm kind of taking out one of the harmonics here, and I have this utility to kind of bring it in over the span of half the section. But yeah, so the track sounds like this. So the next sound here is the main sub, which is just playing the same note the whole time, and it's a very low D. So this is just a sine wave with Fab Filter Saturn on the heavy saturation mode. After that, some more distortion from the saturator, and this is kind of going from -36 all the way up to 3, or just under 3. Then I have some erosion, and that also comes up over the course of the note. Some amp, which is in mono, and just a bit less highs here. And then at the end of it, I've got utility, bringing the volume down. I'm also automating the output of the saturator here. It's at its loudest, and then it fades out here, and after that, just to make sure it's completely off, I have the utility fading out here at the end. This operator gradually gets more notes added to it, so there's this bass note, and then every 4 bars it gets another one. I have some automation for it as well, so the first one here is this pitch envelope, and the pitch envelope in the operator is this 2.5 second long rise from 4 octaves lower. And you can hear that here in just every other set of 4 bars I have it turned off. So for this note there isn't any pitch envelope added, for this one there is. For this one there isn't, and then for this one there is. Over time, the filter frequency gets higher, so I'm keeping the movement where it goes to 0 at the end of the bar, but it's gradually increasing. And then I have the grain delay tone on the end, and that sounds like this. If I turn off the reverb, you can hear it better. It's that sound, and without it's this. The reverb comes on here, just creating kind of just a longer tail. As the rest of the sounds fade out. And then, yeah, it's these effects, and they don't have much automation. Just hear it as well, I suppose. I have the low pass turned off for this first note. Then the next new thing is another labs patch, and this is again the soft piano. In this case I have 2 chains. 2 chains. The first one sounds like this. So I'm using an amp, and I'm automating the kind of the makeup of the amp as it goes on. So the bass gets quieter, the middle gets a little bit quieter, and the treble becomes a lot more pronounced. You can hear that compared to this. There's just so much more bass. To kind of make it not as pronounced, with the kind of typical amp highs, I have a cabinet afterwards, and this is also switching from condenser to dynamic here. Or from dynamic to condenser. Then I have just a high pass for this last note, and this reverb which comes on here. Then I have a saturator on soft sine mode again, and this is turning on here, just for this note. Same with the autopan, so not only does the amount increase on the autopan, it goes from kind of providing some subtle stereo modulation to some very much audible panning around the head. Then I have a collection of kind of ambient samples which make up the base of the sort of texture of the song. So this first one is a Paul Stretch sample of me hitting my tongue drum, which I also use as the main instrument in Tines, and that sounds like this. Without any effects, it sounds like this. So the first thing here is a phaser with a very high feedback, and it's set to space mode, adding some notches into the spectrum. After that I have an overdrive where I'm automating the high frequencies down, so the emphasis it has on high frequencies. After that I have a vocoder, and this is taking an input from this next patch, which I'll explain in a second, and that sounds like this. It's only really relevant here, towards the beginning. That's it without. That's it with. It kind of makes it more breathy because of the nature of this sound here. Then I have the same rotator preset with an octave up using a low frequency here. And that comes in here near the end. Then I have some auto pan. This is beat synced, so it's on quarter notes, and it also gets louder near the end of the sound. Then I have some bit crushing. Which you can hear come in slowly here, and then just to kind of help the highs taper off in this one section, I turn it all down with the low pass. After that, some multiband dynamics, so dynamic EQ to bring out the highs and control the mids a bit more. Some reverb, which turns on at the end, and some heavy compression with a ratio of 10, so you could essentially consider it limiting, and just some EQ, taming the highs a little bit, a utility for this one section here, and then just this band which I use for analyzing. Then I have this atmosphere sound, which sounds like this. This is just a sample, and the sample sounds like this. And then I've put a phaser on it. I'm frequency shifting it here and automating the volume, so it gets quieter here and then quieter and even quieter. This next one is a sample which is panned left. I've recorded it myself. It's a pull stretched version of me chucking rocks onto the side of a metal bridge, and because it's pull stretched, those sounds of the rock hitting the bridge get completely like destroyed, and you can't actually make out what it is, but it sounds like this. And in this case, I've just put an amp on it, on heavy mode, some cabinet afterwards, because otherwise it's not very pretty. A resonator set to D, and just taking out the lows, because there's a lot of rumble in there. This last one is a sample I recorded myself as well. This is me standing underneath an air vent on a ferry to Saint-Malo in France, and I just recorded the kind of the hiss of the air coming out of it. And this one's panned right to make up for this one. And then I have the intro to Constellations, that chord, which is reversed, pitched down so it fits in the same key, and it gets low pass at the end. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one, where I break down the third track of my EP, Constellations. Thanks for watching.